Jabberwocky?
I'm not sure if it's 6 or 7. I'll have to check it.
I'll check
Oh,
too. I
mhm.
and let me make sure we're on the same track for the day. Is that Saturday?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So
Saturday, November 8th.
yeah, that's where I was confused. I thought it was this Saturday, but it's November 8th.
Well, it was originally this Saturday, and then we had to change it. I think
Yeah,
Andre has some issue with
for people who
something.
have signed on, we're talking about an event at Jabberwocky Bookstore Saturday, November 8th at about 6 in the evening, where I'll be talking to the author I'm talking to now. Okay, so let me introduce you properly. This is In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer, and I am Frank Schaeffer, and my guest today is Marianne Leone. And Marianne is an actress, essayist, screenwriter. Her essays have appeared in the Boston Globe and Coastal Living, among other places. She has appeared in films, and those include one with Martin Scorsese, a recurring role in HBO's Sopranos, and is the author of a memoir, Jesse, which I've read, which was actually the first book of yours I read. Um, and most recently, Five Dog Epiphany, which I have not read. And she is the author of a new book I have read, and I have showed Marianne a moment ago, but I'm going to show you all again. And that's the dog-eared copy of this book, which is Christina the Astonishing, and it's a novel. And I love the book. I'm very prepared to talk about it. Let's keep going with this boilerplate here. I'm asking you to please subscribe right now on YouTube to In Conversation with Frank Schaeffer and on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And to my Substack, it has to be said page where I do commentary at frankschaeffer.substack.com. And you can also follow me at my new project, thegospelofzip.com. And Marianne was kind enough to hold up an autographed copy of a book of mine she read many years ago called Portofino, which was a novel. And I'm going to begin not by plugging that novel, although because I'm an author, everything really is a plug, well disguised, but I'm going to mention the fact, and then I'll only mention it once, that when I read Christina the Astonishing, there were two things that sort of tied me to you. First of all, I really enjoyed the book. Secondly, my first novel was also a work of humor set in a family in which anybody who knew me said, well, this is as much memoir biography as it is fiction. And of course, I know enough about you, Marianne, to know that this is your book here is set in a non-fictional world in which you actually grew up. And we're going to talk about what the difference is. So let me, first of all, just talk about you a little bit here. And I made some notes to go to here that Portofino, okay, we've talked about that. I think your father, I know this is personal stuff first, but I just want to paint a picture of you. I think your father passed away when you were 15 or something like that.
Yes,
Is
yes,
that correct?
that's
Okay, so I'm
correct.
hurrying through my notes here. You met your husband in an acting class. Were you in your 20s?
Yes.
Okay, I'm getting this stuff right. Um, you've known my friend Fontaine Dubusse for about 10 years.
Oh, more than that, more than
Okay,
that.
it
At
just
least
seems
15,
longer.
but
Everything seems longer. How long do
yes.
you think you've known her for?
I think about 15 years
Okay,
because I met Andre with the publishing of my first book.
well, Fontaine is godmother to a couple of my grandchildren, and we have a long connection with that family. Um, Now, you are someone who has been friends with Andre Dubusse, my friend, and so forth. I met you, I think, after or just before I read your book about Jesse, who was your son. And how many years ago did Jesse pass away?
He passed away in 2005, 20 years ago,
Yeah,
longer than he was on this earth,
yeah, and how old was he?
17.
17, because I just told my producer Ernie that I thought he'd been 18. I'm sorry, I got it wrong.
Yes.
But your book, that book resonated with me on so many levels. First of all, I'm a parent.
Mm.
Secondly, having suffered from polio myself, which was minor flea bite compared to what he had, but I spent my time, being looked at by other people as sort of different. I have an atrophied left leg. I used to wear long pants all the time. In addition to which, I grew up in a fundamentalist community, which relates very much to Christina the Astonishing in a sort of odd way with your Catholic nuns, which we're going to get into. But we were very reclusive, and I wasn't sent to public schools. I was being homeschooled. And the only people, and I think I mentioned this years ago to you, that I played with regularly, I had no friends in the village at all because I wasn't in school there. But there was a home for cerebral palsy children next door to me.
Oh,
So I literally grew up
yeah.
having my only friends being nonverbal kids in wheelchairs,
Amazing.
literally. So when
Amazing.
I read Jesse,
Oh,
and I'm getting tears thinking about it, I was thinking of Gisela and these other kids that I would line up and play with in their wheelchairs. And you know how kids are, just like the nuns, thinking about sin and saints was your normal until it wasn't.
right. Right.
My normal was, well, of course, next door to our house. And it wasn't like, well, this is, I mean, doesn't everybody?
Yes.
So I've gone through life um, having had as my first friends as a child from the age of about 4 years old until I was 15, 16, 17. My literal best friends were kids in wheelchairs, some of whom were nonverbal. So when I read about Jesse, I felt I knew him.
Yes. Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's an odd connection you and me have. We've written books couched in a religious mother, yours being an Italian, you know,
Not religious mother.
not particularly religious, who's kicking back against the Irish nuns who look down on Italians because they're having too few children,
Yes.
compared to the big Irish families in Boston.
And they're
But
too
I just wanted to bring
sensual.
that up because it's a very deep connection I have with you in a very strange way.
Yes.
I really got the book, and I
Yes.
loved your book, and I've kind of been so interested in you ever since. And by the way, we did not book this because of Andre and Fontaine.
Uh,
My producer booked this because he was interested in it as a book and then figured out that we knew each other. So
oh,
that's
that's
a
great.
nice legitimacy to this interview.
Yes. Yes.
And then you've got your Five Dog Epiphany, which also has a little bit to do with Jesse and a whole process of grief because you lost a book. I mean, not a book, a child, and then also talking about losing dogs, and then you adopted more. I think this is your first novel. Is that correct?
That's true. It's
Okay.
absolutely right.
And you live on the South Shore near Boston. I don't want to give away anybody's age. I'm 73. That's all I'll say. But
I'm in your age range.
we may be of a similar generation.
Yes,
So we know
definitely.
shit. In addition to which, if I make a T-shirt and send you one sometime, it'll be "I'm old, don't fuck with me."
Absolutely.
That's what I want to
People
tell everybody who crosses my path that messes with.
totally out of fucks to
Okay,
give.
so we've gone through some notes here. Let me get you to start this review of your book, this interview of your book. I'd like you to read chapter one, which is called Sin Eater. And I
Hmm.
want people to understand the reason we're doing this is because I don't want to talk about a novel because it's not a nonfiction work and here's all these ideas we're going to go range through. I want them to get the flavor of the book. And I have two
Right.
readings for you to do. The first one now, and then we'll discuss the book. If you don't mind opening this
Sure.
interview with that reading. Thank you.
Happy to. This chapter is called Sin Eater. Rita holds the round loaf of bread dangerously close to her chest and saws away, wielding the long knife like a suicidal violinist. The hard crust crackles. Christina, her little brother Vinny, and her grandfather sit around the red enamel-topped kitchen table eating dinner. Christina's mother and her father Joe will eat later, at a more civilized time, in the dining room, with a white tablecloth and the wine Joe makes every year from Montepulciano grapes and stores in round oak casks in the cellar cantina. Rita places the bread on the table. President Kennedy is on the radio saying something important about underground testing in his queer accent that everyone says is a Boston accent, but which sounds the way no one speaks in Christina's city 7 miles outside of Boston. Christina turns the dial abruptly to a station playing the kind of music she likes, fruity pop songs sung by almost crying men. Christina's nun teachers would gasp at the disrespect. They practically genuflect every time they speak the name of the first Catholic president. The music isn't helping to drown out the enthusiastic chewing and gulping going on around her. Christina tries to lose herself in her comic book, but now her grandfather's slurping is getting on her nerves. She reads the same panel 3 times and looks up. Vinny, directly opposite, chews with his mouth open, smiling at her to better reveal the mess within. Christina pushes away her pasta fagioli. I can't eat. I'm going to throw up. She glares at Vinny, who is now guzzling his drink and making a little humming sound of delight. He smiles again, orangeade glistening on his chin. You're a pig! Rita points the knife at her. I got a knife in my hand. Her voice is low and dangerous. Christina's grandfather, his mouth also full, rumbles out his all-purpose mollifier, the only phrase he knows in English. It's all right. It's all right. Miss Prim, her mother mutters. Rita's truthful assessment of her finicky nature always enrages Christina. Her mother is anything but prim. She wears snug black capri pants and flirty little blouses. Her pillowy lips are always enhanced with Revlon's fire and ice, even around the house. Christina grabs her comic book and flees. She hates Friday nights. Meatless Friday nights mean pasta fagioli, the mushy beans, the red iridescent soup that surrounds the slimy little elbow macaroni and increases the slurp factor at the table to intolerable levels. Her mother's shriek follows Christina up the stairs. You're going to get sick! Christina slams the door to her room. I have homework, she yells through the closed door. I'm taking you to the doctor. Rita's ultimate threat seeps faintly through the door. You stupid plebeian, Christina mutters under her breath. Plebeians are commoners, Sister said. Patricians are aristocrat. Christina is an aristocrat, trapped in a family of plebeians who make pigpen sounds at dinner. Do
I
you want me
love
to
that.
stop?
And you know what? When I asked you to read that, I said, "Oh, this will go, maybe it's too long." It goes very quickly.
Yes, I didn't read the whole thing. I just
No,
read.
I know that,
Yeah,
but I mean,
that's
we'll
yes.
we'll go there.
Oh,
Let me just interject one thing in terms of introducing you before we go further. Can you hear me okay?
yes, I can. Can you hear
Oh,
me?
yes, I hear you fine.
Okay.
Yeah. And that is that I wanted to mention the fact that this reading you're doing at the Jabberwocky, I want to promote that a little bit. It's November 8th. We talked about it. You're being introduced by a mutual friend, Andre Dubusse, who's a novelist, House of Sand and Fog, and all that stuff. And then one other thing, and we'll get past this quickly, that you and I have in common, um, and that I want you to, continue your reading. That I'm interrupting. And go ahead with that, is that both of us as writers, we're both serious writers and had some successes, but we both live in the shadow of somebody famous in our family. In
It's
your
true.
case, you married him. So just mention who your husband is.
My husband is Chris Cooper, who is an Academy Award winner and a fantastic actor. But
Yeah.
more importantly than anything, he was the best father in the world. We've been married 42 years, and he is the
Yeah.
best man I know.
Well, there we are. And then me, it's not that same warm relationship, although Jeannie and I have been together now for 56 years
Oh
because
my
we met when we
gosh.
were 17 and 18, and I got her pregnant when she was traveling as a hippie in Europe on a Eurail pass for a high school graduation present. But where we met, speaking of famous relatives, was at my father's um, evangelical fundamentalist kind of cult headquarters, where soon he became very famous. And then when he would be in Washington, he'd be staying in the White House with various Republican presidents. And he and I were very much part of the religious right in the 1970s and 80s, out of which our present moment of history comes. And we're not here to talk about that. But I've had some New York Times bestsellers and done some things, as you've done some things, but sooner or later in the conversation, it always comes up, well, how does this relate to your father's work? And sooner or later, people want to talk about Chris Cooper, but we're not going to go there. We're going to pretend that my dad didn't do anything and that your husband isn't famous, and we'll just stick with your book. Okay, having interrupted you, do you remember where you were in the reading?
Yes,
Because we need to finish
yes.
it.
Christina lies on her frilly bed, the pink nylon coverlet itching her back. The coverlet catches her curls in its staticky grip. She flings the creepily grasping bedspread on the floor and rolls over onto her stomach. She gazes at the picture of Christ above her bed. He looks about the same age as Christina in the picture, 9, maybe a little younger, with dreamy brown eyes and blonde curly hair. He seems a little sad and afraid, his girlish lips pressed together as if to hold back tears. His eyes follow you, asking shyly for love. The background of the painting is a somber brown, except for the thin line of light surrounding his angelic head. It looks like Jesus is wearing a cowboy hat with a glowing brim. In fact, until just last year, Christina believed the picture was of a random kid in a cowboy hat that her mother had picked out because Christina had a crush on Dick West, the all-American boy cowboy on TV. It was her chunky friend Rose who had set her straight one day when they were playing house, and Christina announced that the cowboy above her bed was going to be her husband. Rose stared at it. You can't be married to Jesus
Mm,
unless you're going to be a nun. Are
mm,
you going to be a nun? Rose was so dense. That's not Jesus. That's a kid in a cowboy hat. That's
mm,
my husband, and he's a cowboy, stupid. It's Jesus, Rose repeated. Shut up and go home.
mm,
Rose was on the brink of hysteria. Her
mm,
eyes brimmed with tears. Her voice quavered. It is too, Jesus. Nana Rose has that picture in her bedroom, and she told me it was him. A visit to Rose's house had finally convinced Christina. There it was, the
mm.
same picture in Nana Rose's room. Nana Rose blessed herself in front of the blonde child, murmuring in Italian. Christina doubted she was praying to Dick West, all-American boy.
Mm.
Should we stop here?
No, keep going. I love it.
Okay. Christina stares at the ex-cowboy Jesus above her bed. Did her blonde preteen boyfriend have any idea who would end up splayed on a cross with spikes through his hands and feet, and not just one thorn, but a whole mocking crown of them digging into his scalp?
Mm,
Of course he did. He was God, so he already knew everything.
mm,
The nuns say they should strive to become saints. What does that mean? Christina is afraid of hell. She is
mm,
equally afraid of eternity. She fears burning in hell in a place where there is no time. Her mother doesn't believe in hell. Neither does her father.
mm,
They are foolish to tempt the powers of a God who sees everything and has the power to condemn you to hell for all eternity. Her parents won't listen to the nun's stories of hell. They laugh at her when she tells them about the tortures that await them. Her
mm,
mother even commits blasphemy by saying that the nuns are full of shit, that they should see what it's like to fry in a field with the sun beating down on you trying to grow vegetables from rocks and soil that is secco,
mm,
dust, and then giving most of what you have grown to the padrone as payment for working on the land. That is hell, according to her mother.
mm, mm,
Christina is a voice crying in the wilderness like St. John the Baptist.
mm.
Well, she isn't going to hell. She will become a saint and go straight to heaven, sailing right by purgatory, heaven's waiting room, which could go on for hundreds of years. Christina grabs her flashlight, the one she now keeps under the bed to confront ghosts and read secretly at night.
Mm,
She kneels on the bed, the sheet draped over her head as a makeshift veil. She flicks the flashlight under her chin for a haloed effect.
mm,
She admires herself in the mirror on her bureau directly opposite her bed. She looks like a regular saint. Her mother opens the door. Rita, queen of her domain, never knocks.
mhm,
Miss Prim, this how you do homework? Go downstairs and eat. I make you something. On the kitchen table, a BLT, Christina's favorite, with
mm,
chips, extra love. Rita sits heavily across from her, sighing. Christina grabs a comic book from the stack on top of the radiator. She tries to concentrate on her perfect sandwich, but her mother's black eyes bore through the adventures of little Lulu. All is obviously not forgotten. Christina closes the comic book and looks up, but she is severely undermatched in eye-to-eye combat with her mother. I don't know. It is her mother's Let Us Pray, the prelude to a well-worn litany of Christina's many failings.
mm,
Christina bites into her perfect sandwich. The bacon is crisp the way she likes it. The tomato is juicy and ripe, one of her grandfather's miracles from the backyard garden. Then she remembers. She drops the sandwich back onto the plate. Oh no, it's Friday. I can't eat this and receive on Sunday. Rita shrugs. Eat. I take the sin. She smirks. She thinks the Friday no meat rule is pazzo, an
mm,
insane dictum from men who don't cook. What do they know? Did they have to keep an entire family strong to face the hardships life hurled at them? The
mm,
priests back home in her Italian village are all well-padded little waddlers, their florid complexions shining with health and liters of vino. They eat meat every day, not once a month like Rita's impoverished mother and father, and they take their choicest portions offered by their cringing congregants. Bleh. It doesn't work like that. I have to go to confession. Eat. God wants you to eat. It's not a sin. It's a sin to waste food. Irritation propels Rita to jump up and stir Joe's dinner, simmering on the stove. Eat! Hurry up before your father come home. She looks over her shoulder and sees Christina unmoving, staring at the sandwich. Predictably, she snaps, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph! A car door slams in the driveway. Joe, diverting for a moment the path of Rita's lava flow rage, throws open the front door. Vinny hurls his cannonball body at his father's knees. Rico! Joe cries joyously, hefting him aloft, grunting with effort. Pa, He nods to his father, immovable in his rocker, entranced by what he can't understand a word of on television. The soundtrack tells him when to laugh, and he does, obediently, mindlessly,
Mm,
cackling in his old man way. It drives Christina crazy. Now in the kitchen, she hopes her father, with his bar owner's ability to break up fights, can end the BLT standoff. Rita continues to yell, "What? I gotta feed you now like a baby?" Christina's eyes sting at the unfairness of the baby comparison. She isn't a baby. She is 9 years old.
mm,
Joe enters the kitchen and kisses Rita gingerly. Rita doesn't acknowledge the kiss nor shift her withering stare from Christina. She know eat nothing. I make this special for her. She know eat. Daddy, it's a sin, she whispers, her chin trembling.
mm,
I told her I take the sin, Rita snaps. But Sister said, "Oh," Rita sings her full-throated aria of scorn. Sister say. She too much with the fucking nuns. She got
mm,
bad dreams every night. They make her pazzo. She cut all of your roses. She make the thorn in her forehead so she look like Saint Rita. Next time she's gonna nail Vinny to the cross for Christ's sake.
mm,
For Christ's sake, Joe laughs. Rita doesn't get the joke.
mm,
She never lets Christina forget the misbegotten effort of a few years back to present a joyous picture of herself to God as Saint Rita. On that occasion, Christina had solemnly gone about recreating the holy portrait of Saint Rita that hangs in the Falcone hallway. The portrait is in a fancy oval frame, the
mm,
first thing visitors see upon entering their modest house. Saint Rita, her mother's namesake, looks transfixed by tiny Jesus's body attached to
mm,
the wooden cross she holds in both hands. Healthy-looking pink cherubs carrying spills of roses float above her head, and just below the pudgy angels hovers a crown of thorns about an inch above Saint Rita's black veil. The white wimple covering her forehead has as its focal point a thorn that is sticking into the flesh beneath the wimple. St. Rita doesn't appear bothered by the thorn, even though it looks more like a spike. She's too busy venerating the tiny Jesus.
mm,
Christina had intended to present a picture to God of herself venerating the cross. Christina plans to become a saint and guarantee her place in heaven. She had hoped that God would fill her with grace, especially if she endured the thorn in her forehead. Like St. Rita, she had
mm,
knelt before her father's rose bushes, partially denuded to provide decoration for the crucifix that she removed from above her parents' bed. Two of Christina's plastic baby dolls, naked, also decorated with cut roses, were smashed sideways into the bushes above her head. Christina herself wore her mother's Niagara Falls scarf in place of a wimple. She had gritted her teeth and stabbed herself on the forehead, but instead of grace, all she'd earned was her mother's screeching threats and a small scar between her eyebrows.
mm,
But that was 2 whole years ago. Christina is older now and knows more about what pleases God. Following the rules about Meatless Friday is one of the important things God demands.
mm,
The impossibility of explaining this to her mother leaves Christina on the verge of tears.
mm.
In 3 years, I'll be confirmed. I'll be a soldier of Christ. I can't eat this. Joe utilizes his superior peacemaking skills. He pretends to have an idea. Hey, Dolly, speaking of soldiers, guess what's on tonight? Sergeant Bilko, you want to watch it with me? Okay, Christina sniffs. The standoff over, Rita whisks away the plate with the BLT. She reaches into the freezer and places an ice cream sandwich in front of her daughter. Here, eat, no meat. She smiles at Christina, sits down, and takes a big, devilish bite of the BLT, consigning her soul to hell, or at least purgatory. Christina unwraps her ice cream sandwich and nibbles it. "I'm gonna be a soldier of Christ," she mumbles. She feels sorry for her mother. Not for the first time. She pictures Rita burning in hell for all eternity, the tongues of fire licking her sinful black capri pants. Christina's father winks at her, and she takes a big bite of her ice cream sandwich, cheered by its gluey sweetness and the thought of her mother in flames.
Yeah, I love that beginning. And I'm so glad I got you to read the whole thing because it's such a snapshot of the entire book in the sense that you've set it up so beautifully, drawn us all in. We're on her side, and we love this little child, immediately. So it's just a fantastic opening to the story. Um,
Thank you.
So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm drawn to the novel for a lot of reasons. One is because I have a very intense religious background. So, let's first talk about your background in terms of the Catholic schools you were at in the Boston area. And we won't go through every single quote I've marked and ask you, is this real or is this fiction? But in the spirit of not doing that for the rest of your book, just give me the general parameters of your childhood, as if you hadn't written the novel, but are interested in describing a very religiously intense beginning. My wife, by the way, Jeannie Schaeffer, that I've been with all these years, went to Catholic schools in California at a different period of her life, and we can talk a little bit about that. But I have some knowledge of that through her. But talk about your actual childhood, irrespective of the book.
Well, my actual childhood, I was raised in a wildly over the top Italian American family,
Yeah,
providing me, oh God, years of material as an
yeah,
actor and as a writer.
yeah,
Um, I was first generation, like Christina in this, which was different than my girlfriends. My little friends, even the ones who were Italian American, they were second generation. So
yeah.
their mothers had been through what I went through, and they loved my mother. They loved hanging at my house. But for
Mm.
me, it was like my sister once found a journal I had written when I was 10 years old. It was attached to, my mother threw everything out, but this was
Yeah.
attached to a bureau my sister was throwing out. She
Mm.
said, "You were such a happy child. What happened?" And I said, "No, I was writing as an American child
Yeah.
because that's what I
Yeah.
wanted to be,
Yeah.
American." So I sound like I'm living in a sod hut and wearing calico, I mean,
Sure.
and a
Sure.
bonnet. Um, and that is not what it was like. In the journal, I call my mother mom, which I
Yeah.
did not. And I also swore like a sailor, even at 10. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't anything like that.
Yeah.
So, all I aspired to was to become American, to not be thought of as different, as foreign. And I really relate to a lot of what's going on now because of that, because
Yeah.
of what
Yeah.
that's like. The otherizing of Italian immigrants was happening even
Yeah.
then, you know?
Yeah.
So I was very aware of that. And I was very aware of what was really American from watching TV. And I
Mm.
wanted our family to be like that. But we were not like that. We were loud, we were crazy. My mother said fuck a lot. It was
Yeah.
just, you know, and she even said it to the nun at one point. She actually felt sorry for them. She thought they were deluded, crazy people who
Yeah.
thought they were
Pat.
married to God instead of a real
Yeah.
man. And, so I heard this stuff all the time.
Mm.
But yet I had Stockholm syndrome because I bought everything they said. I was
But I
five
have a
years
question
old.
for you to interject there, and that is, given your parents' views of the nuns
Yeah.
specifically, or the church in general,
Why? Why
what were
did they
you doing
send
in a
me?
Catholic school?
Ah, because they were immigrants,
Yeah.
because they were Italian immigrants, and they had this one thought. Public school is free. How good can it be? In
Yeah.
Italy, you pay for everything but the air you breathe,
Yeah.
right? You want
Yeah.
the priest to read a letter from home? Dozen eggs.
Yeah.
So that was their thinking. This has got to
Yeah.
be better. You pay for it. It
Yeah.
wasn't, of course. It was worse. I mean, I lived in Newton. That city had one of the top 10 high schools in the country,
Sure.
you know? Ridiculous. So,
Yeah. Yeah, so
uh,
that's a bit of the story. And I'm curious about something, and that is that your dad passed away when you were quite young. And so did
yeah,
the dynamic change? And I haven't matched dates to real life here, but where were you in this journey when he
that did
died
it for
in
me.
terms of your character and
That
how?
I would say that was the motivating factor for me to lose my religion,
Yeah,
was when my dad died. Because, first of all, not only, I mean, it was a typical Italian wake. It was like people pulling him out of the coffin, screaming. It was really over the top,
yeah,
dramatic, fainting, the whole works. My
yeah,
mother was there devastated,
mm,
43, three kids, English as a second language,
yeah,
no marketable skills outside of cooking.
yeah,
And my teacher came up to my mother, took her hand, and said, God needed him in heaven.
yeah,
And my mother looked at her and said, fuck God, I need him here.
yeah, yeah,
And all I could think of was like, these are my teachers.
yeah,
I mean, it was, but later I felt like,
yeah,
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 and
yeah,
also when I would think that, well, according to their laws, since he golfed every Sunday,
yeah,
He's burning in hell right now. This
Yeah.
man who was the most generous man I knew, this man who was kind, generous, who we
Hmm.
found, homeless old men in our rec room downstairs that he took
Yeah.
in and then placed in a home. We
Yeah.
had, you know, there were people continually like, can I leave my kids here? I'm having problems
Yeah.
with my wife.
Yeah.
This was going on at our house. You know who reminds me of my dad?
Yeah.
Andre Debus, who is like very generous, outgoing
Sure.
person and I thought they're gonna consign him to hell. I
Yeah.
don't buy this. I
Yeah.
just don't buy it, you know?
Yeah.
And by then, of course, I had already discovered Harvard Square. I was reading a lot outside of I mean,
Yeah.
all we read were books about the lives of the saints and leprosy.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was talking with Jeannie the other day about her Catholic school experiences, and she quit Catholic school at about age 12 and then went to a quote unquote
Smart.
secular public high school, having had enough of it. Her journey was a little different than yours in that she experienced some of what you're talking about, no love stories. It's always,
Hmm.
sexuality suspect. Don't touch yourself down there. Always use a face
Hmm.
cloth. You don't want your hand, all that sort of stuff. She got a bit of that. She also had one nun in first grade, sweet sister Patrice, she remembers with great fondness. But then that nun got fired by a very controlling archbishop in Los Angeles who didn't want her or these other more liberated
Uh,
sisters.
to
So,
actually follow the gospel.
yeah, to actually follow the gospel. And then fast forward, by the way, before Sister Patrice died, she was down in marching with Martin Luther King Jr. So,
Yeah.
she had a whole nother life that sort of fulfilled what we're talking about. So I see you reaching for something. What you got there?
I want to read you a short piece I wrote about nuns
Yeah, okay.
for
Let's hear
Condescension.
something about it because
Yeah,
if that triggers another little piece by you, then but we're not selling that. We're selling your book. Just
I
keep
understand,
keep your
but I
eye on the
want people
ball.
to understand that
Yeah,
my attitude myself
yeah,
is these days I find myself in the awkward position of defending nuns.
yeah,
It's awkward because after 12 years of parochial school, I left the church and have rarely looked back with any affection for the experience of the sisters who taught me. In first grade, I developed a rapid blink facial tic and had horrific dreams about boiling in oil and having my eyes plucked out, like the Christian martyrs the nuns extolled as role models.
yeah,
For minor infractions, like talking out of turn, kids were forced to don baby bonnets and were paraded through classrooms to the jeering laughter of their peers, like Chinese political prisoners made to wear dunce caps during the revolution. When I saw the Magdalene Sisters, the 2002 film about
sure.
the psychological abuse of female inmates at the hands of Irish nuns, it felt like a documentary to me, especially when one of the nuns got nose to nose with an inmate and asked in a high witchy voice, "Are you in Egypt then?"
Mm.
I wasn't called an idiot, but I was continually told I was bold for asking questions or
Yeah.
speaking before I was spoken to. "You are bold, Miss Leone," was the daily invective
Mm.
hurled at me in those days. Bold wasn't a virtue then. It was the hallmark of an insurgent who questioned authority. And along with reading forbidden books, seeing films condemned by the Legion of Decency, or not memorizing the catechism, it was a punishable offense. I learned about the outside world and about social activism not from the nuns, but from Martin Luther King, Bob Dylan, and Simone de
Hmm.
Beauvoir. I became a committed and effective activist after I had a severely disabled son and had to fight for his right to be regarded as fully human.
Yeah.
In June of this year, a band of Catholic nuns mounted a 14-day bus tour to protest Republican federal budget
Mm.
proposals. This is a while back, that included steep reductions in programs that assist the poor, the elderly, and the disabled. They're doing it
Mm.
again.
Mm. Yeah.
These courageous sisters were attacked by the church hierarchy for living according to the vows they took to
Yeah.
relieve human suffering.
Yeah.
The most recent rebuke comes after the Vatican issued an April report criticizing the Leadership Council of Women Religious for focusing too much on social justice and not enough on abortion and same-sex
Mm.
marriage.
Mm.
The priests in charge, who presumably took the same vows as the nuns, chose to focus their wrath on these sisters who work on the front lines of poverty in the soup kitchens, the homeless shelters, and other places that rarely hear the swish of a soutane.
Yeah.
Earlier this month in Charlotte, in a speech before the Democratic National Convention, the nun spokeswoman, Sister Simone Campbell, received thunderous audience applause when she said, "Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan are correct when they say that each individual should be responsible. But their
Mm.
budget goes astray in not acknowledging that we are responsible not only for ourselves and our immediate families. Rather,
Yeah.
our faith strongly affirms that we are all responsible for one another. I am my sister's keeper. I am my brother's keeper."
Mm.
Let me join the enthusiastic applause of that audience. I may not have learned about social activism from my parochial school teachers, but I recognize it when I see it. To
Yeah.
each Catholic nun who is challenging the status quo, I say, you are bold, sister. Keep challenging the false authority of those who diminish the lives of the marginalized. My now unblinking ex-Catholic eyes are wide with admiration for you
Yeah.
and your cause.
Yeah. And there's a similar strain running through my wife Jeannie's experience with sweet sister Patrice, who was so out of character with the other nuns that she remembers her first grade teacher's kindness in a class of 50, by the way.
That's
And
what we had.
there were some classes of 70, she said,
Yes,
that, it made such an impression upon her. Imagine if all the nuns teaching her had been sweet sister Patrice.
yes, yes, yes,
And it's no coincidence that after what you just read, that sweet sister Patrice in her obit, which we looked up, was down there marching with Luther King. So, it's so interesting. It's this bi-coastal reality that you
yes.
experienced in New England. Jeannie's in California. You're both about the same age. I have to mention it because Jeannie and I talk about this quite a bit. Okay, so we're going to do what we're here for, which is to talk about your book. Although having read it, we've done a lot because anybody
Yes.
with half an ear has already gotten deeply into your book and wants to read it themselves now, or they should no longer listen to my thing here. You, there are so many things that I've marked passages. Again, this is not a nonfiction book. Um, Something early here again in the book. The nuns are all, with one French Canadian exception, Irish American women, despite the absurdly male names bestowed upon them when taking their final vows. They disapprove of the Italians, whom they
Yep.
consider superstitious, mentally subpar, and um, members of as suspiciously smaller families than the Irish, who pump a steady supply of students into Precious Bloods, that's the name of the school, elementary and high schools. It makes Christina depressed. It's all true. The Falcones are not good members of the Christian community, especially her mother. Her father at least sends turkey over to the nuns at Thanksgiving. I just love that. It's such, one of the things I love about this book is you managed to write a book that grown-ups like me can read from the point of view of a child, but when you're in the voice of the child and expressing her feelings, you have not forgotten what it is like to be a child. You really see the world through her eyes. I think it's incredibly convincing. As you take her through her teen years the same. So that's a passage I love. So I wanted to talk a little bit about your family, which we've done, but her father at least sends a turkey over to the nuns at Thanksgiving. So I'm going to ask you point blank on that one, if that is a true memory, or did you just make that up to
That's a
fill
true memory.
I
My
thought it
father
was.
did send a
Yeah.
turkey. Yeah.
And then also very close to that part of the book, you've got somebody saying, "Are you being bold, Miss Falcone? I don't tolerate bold girls in my class. Be
Right.
seated." And I
The
thought, again,
bold.
that ties in with what you
Yeah.
write about. Okay, let me get to a passage I want to ask you about here a little later in the book. Um, when I talk about my grandmother and some of my memories and some of my writing, this really struck a thing here. You and I have very similar kind of experiences at different ends of the spectrum. By now, she is able to light up like a pro without coughing. This is a grandmother character. It's an old
Yeah.
lady in the chapter called Babe. But the funny thing is, um, I wrote a book called Saving Grandma many years ago. I'm not selling it now, but the irreverent old lady who crashed into my lap
Yes.
was my grandmother.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And so she wasn't lighting up a cigarette because she was 90, but she was this person.
Oh, that's
So
great.
when my mother talked to my grandmother, and she could have been talking to your friend who offers you cigarettes and the whole bit,
Right.
and my mom said to my grandmother that she needed to accept Jesus Christ as her personal savior, and he would become her best friend. And my grandmother stared at her and says, "I got all the friends I want."
That's something Babe wouldn't say.
Yeah, when I was 11.
Absolutely.
So I got to tell that
Absolutely.
story only because it's, again, okay, so I'm going to do this for the last time, but I'm going to ask you about
She's a
this old
total
woman.
figment.
Where does this woman come from?
She is my wish fulfillment. That's where she comes
Yeah,
from.
yeah, exactly. Now, my
Yeah.
grandma was real.
I
And
wish I had
cashed
known
in on
her.
it by quoting her in some of the things I wrote. But this is a fantastic invention, and it's a
Oh,
wonderful
thank you.
foil
Thank you.
because
Yes.
she's everything the nuns fear,
Right.
And she's a blind person living in a special home that and imagining how she's decorated her room in this
Yes,
drab
yes.
place she's never even seen. I love this character. And of course, you place her sort of in the heart of the book. She's really the
Right.
fulcrum upon which the whole story turns, unless I've misunderstood it.
You're absolutely right.
So talk about how you created this character. And rather than me reading bits and pieces of her favorite lines, but I just would indulge in one.
I
Um,
love it.
Christina
Uh,
has been visiting Babe for 4 years now, ever since her fourth grade class had been dragooned into performing at St. Lucy's. So, talk a little bit about this
oh,
character, the story, how they met,
I
because,
usually open my readings with this by saying, and I do read this chapter a lot when
yeah,
I'm on my own. I think I'm going to read it at Jabberwocky.
yeah,
But what I talk about is the fact that it's she is the amalgam of all these bold women that I really loved from
yeah,
40s movies that I used to
yeah,
see. They were on in the afternoon when I came home from school. These tough babes like Barbara Stanwyck and those girls. That's who she reminded. She is like my wishful, like I wished I had somebody like that
yeah.
you know, um, to
To
direct
to
me.
in your life, but in a
Yeah,
way, she's you because you sort of become this woman. I
that's
mean,
true in a bizarre way.
this is
She
your
reminds me,
updated version. You're the If you met yourself now, you're
true.
the person who would lead her astray.
You're absolutely right. That is a very good idea.
Yeah,
That's a
you
very good
basically just,
observation.
this is biographical. This is you. You'd hand her a cigarette and start talking about, maybe you can touch yourself without a face cloth.
That's hilarious and true, I think.
So I want
She
you to
is,
go to page 79. I don't want you in your, and I want you to go down to the middle paragraph that starts, "It was bad." And I didn't
oh,
know you
yeah,
were going to read this, but
yes,
I'm going to have you read. And I'd like you to read, if you may, over to "Babe is Unmoved." Trust me, kid, it
yeah,
was about
yeah,
sex,
yeah, yeah.
because that whole passage is really important to the book. Plus, it'll just draw people in further. And again, this is about a quarter of the way through. So you've had the beginning. Now I'm getting Marianne to drop you into the, not the middle, but a quarter
The
in. So you're
third,
getting a bit
yeah,
of the flow of the story. So why don't you read that from there to there?
okay. It was bad. Everyone knows I started it, and I'm afraid someone's going to tell, and then I'll get killed and maybe expelled. And everyone's mad at me at school. Christina feels the relief of saying it out loud. She has never felt this lightening of spirit after actually going to confession when she recites the same unvarying list of venial sins, talking back to her mother, sneakily assaulting her brother, being mean to Rose, her best friend since babyhood, always omitting, of course, the strange, exciting, and wrong, so wrong, impure acts of touching herself every night when she is lying in bed after first running her hands over her breast to check for any growth and suffering the daily crushing disappointment when the status quo remains unchanged. Flat, flat, flat as a board. But you can't go to jail for touching yourself. Christina's pretty sure of that, although what do sodomy laws mean? She heard that on the news or somewhere. She thinks sodomy is just about some woman being punished by turning into a pillar of salt for being too curious and looking at what she shouldn't. The murky sixth commandment is in there somehow, though. That salt woman was probably staring at somebody's private, like when Vinny was a baby and Christina peeked at his nether parts when his mother bathed him in the sink.
Mm.
You
Yeah,
want me to stop there? Yeah.
no, keep going. I love it.
So Babe talks back to her then.
Yeah.
Well, you just gonna leave me hanging? Christina hastily abandons the disturbing brain picture of Vinny's snail-like penis. All we were doing was turning cartwheels during recess. Some drippy girls were talking about sodality, and I started to cheer for the Blessed Mother to make fun of them. Then I turned a cartwheel, then Patsy did, then all my other friends did too. Then when we came in from lunch, Sister sent the boys to study hall, and then the priest came in too. Jeez, they called in the Gestapo, Babe says, mock impressed.
Mm.
Father McMullen asked us if we could imagine the Blessed Mother turning cartwheels. That gets a loud snicker from Babe. I still don't get what the big deal was all about, Christina says. Were the boys watching you? Babe asks. Christina, suddenly uncomfortable, shrugs. Then she remembers Babe can't see her shoulders, so she mumbles something non-committal. She doesn't like where this conversation is going. It was about sex, kiddo,
Mm.
Babe declares.
Yeah, that's
Christina,
great. Yeah. So you get a feeling of who Babe is, and also just at sort of a midpoint in the journey. So I'm going to jump out of this for a minute and just talk about you again for a second. Going back, in terms of stuff you've done, and there is a connection here because you've been involved with very creative people.
Hmm.
Give me a 2-minute thumbnail on your association with The Sopranos, because of everything you've kind of done, obviously that jumps off the page.
Yeah.
I've watched the series a couple times and I remember you well in it. Um, so I don't want to brush past that because it has something to do with this book because it's
Yes,
also set
you're
in Italian
absolute,
America. It's
you are
not
so
unrelated.
smart.
I'm not asking you about your husband, whose name we won't even mention. And I'm not
You
talking
know,
about my dad, whose name we won't mention, but I'm talking about a work experience that ties you to the Italian
you are
community.
absolutely right because I said in my author statement that I got a recurring role in The Sopranos, and it may have been my time on that series that made me think about coming up in a character-rich environment with a
Hmm.
tiny enclave of people from the same mountain village in Italy and a wildly dramatic and
Yeah,
inadvertently hilarious family. I wanted to write about growing up in that juicy realm, and of course, about being desperate to escape it.
yeah,
And because I mean,
yeah, sure.
when I read those scripts, those were the best written scripts I've ever come across,
Yeah,
really, for
yeah,
myself.
absolutely.
And what I loved was how they worked humor in, even with the violence and everything
Yeah,
else.
of
It was
course.
very funny.
Yeah,
And I it gave me the impetus to write this. It really did. And I had
yeah,
first written this as a screenplay, this novel.
yeah,
And it was optioned, and then it sat there. So I novelized it.
yeah, as screenplays are wont to do.
Yes. So I
Been there, done
novelized
that,
it.
because I
I'm
did
sure
that.
you've had that with
Yes, I
Portofino.
have. I
I'm
have. It's been
sure.
through 3 options so far.
Yeah. You should.
I
Yeah.
even I even was sent to scout locations by the production team at one point. They paid for my trip and I went back to all my places I thought it was happening.
Oh,
And then some,
that's
some German
fabulous.
financiers dropped out.
At least you got a trip to Italy out of it.
I did get a trip to Italy. It
Yeah.
was more than I got out of the other ones. But anyway, talk a little more about that connection with The Sopranos because the whole Italian American thing, of course, it's a different series. It's about mobsters in New Jersey, but there's a connection, not in that small village sense of recreating communities. It may just be a local cafe. It might be the church. It may be the parochial
Totally.
school. But this is a big chunk of your life. You were raised in it, and then
Totally.
how long were you involved with the series when they were making it?
I did um I did 4 seasons.
Yeah, so that's a
I
long
did
time.
9 episodes. And it was great. It was really fun.
Yeah,
And everybody, we knew everybody because everybody had acted with everybody else, of
sure.
course, being ethnically stereotyped in different. I'd been in a film with Michael Imperioli, Frank Vincent,
Yeah,
all of those people. And so when I saw them again, it was, you know, we all knew each other.
yeah,
And it was a really good experience, and a lot of it was very similar to my own experience growing up, I have to say.
yeah.
Um, the humor, the same kind of humor, the same kind of, family that talked louder than everybody else, and all of it was very, very similar. And it may have been that made me want to write about it, you know.
Yeah, and not to take you to a different place here, but since I've already jumped out of the book into another discussion for a second, I want to go to one other thing, and that is being I'm 73, and I wrote in the evangelical context when I was sort of a sycophantic, sidekick to my
Yeah.
father. Then when I left, I wrote a real book called Portofino, which you've referenced,
Yes.
and some other novels, I think 3 or 4 other novels, and then um, another 10 or so books that are nonfiction memoir kind of things. One involving a son as well, like you with Jesse, except mine went to Afghanistan and was a Marine there. So, I've
Mm.
experienced,
Yes.
recycling my family and my own life into my books, as one does.
Right.
Um, I remember talking to Andre when he was going to write Townie, asking me
Yeah.
about my memoir, saying, what did you say? What didn't you say? We all do the same things. So I want to ask kind of a general question, a writerly question. I've seen
Yes.
the publishing business change in
Oh,
lots of ways. I had the same editor and agent for years and years and so forth. And as you know, the publishing business is very different. And one of the big differences that's sort of whispered but not talked about is the diminishing number of readers.
yes.
And you hear you see professors at Harvard quote an article saying, they used to assign something like 80 books a year to their students, and now if you can get them to read 8, you're lucky. And
Oh,
this
it's
is this is
terrifying.
Harvard, and this is Harvard.
Yeah, that is
So you can only
terrifying.
imagine, and then everybody's staring at their phones. So
Yes,
this is going to be a very odd question to you, and I haven't given you this before, so whatever you say, you have not rehearsed. How do you see the connection between younger people who are hesitant to fall in love and even date today, and younger people who don't read anymore, in terms of a kind of a denial of the human experience you and I share? Because we both fell in love and we've maintained a relationship, and these are young, and you had a child and I've had
yes,
children, and these are young people who don't seem to know how to read a book like this because
right,
they're not. If
right,
you know, if they're not, and that's a horrible generality, but they're not. And then, but they're not doing the things you and me took for granted. So, for
right,
instance, you question a lot in this book, but you don't question your parents were together.
right,
You don't question they had kids. You don't question that life will continue and we may have an environmental disasters or a nuclear war, but somewhere someone will be falling in love. But
right,
we interviewed Jean Twenge the other day, who's written this 10 Rules for Raising Kids in a High-Tech World. And she's, along with Jonathan Haidt and all these other social scientists, she's writing about, and she does the real studies of interviewing the kids. And I'd have to get into that with you because you've written a book about your son and you're a mother of experience, you're a lover, you're a wife, you came from a tight knit family, forget where they were. You played in a very famous drama, perhaps the most famous drama of all time. And whatever else The Sopranos was, it was about family. That was it.
right. That's
The
right.
mob stuff was a sideline. It was
That's
the
right.
family relationships that mattered, unless I'm
That's right.
wrong.
That's right. No,
So
you're
I just want to
absolutely
go
right.
there with you. What has happened to both reading and dating? What has
I think
happened
it's
to
social
meeting and
media.
falling in love? What's going
I
on?
think it's totally social media.
You think
I
that's
do.
it?
I really do. And I, I don't know what to say about this because the technology that brings all this computer and I think of my son, my late son, and I think
Sure.
of how great it was for him. So
Yes.
I was always split on this thing.
Yeah. Of
I don't love the screen time. Um, but on the other hand, for Jesse, it was the way he wrote poetry. It was the way he was able
course.
to communicate. It was
Yeah.
all of that. So I'm really torn about that.
Yeah.
I'm really torn about it. And I also see my niece, we helped her, bought a house, um, built a house that added on to the house that I grew up in, which was a
Sure.
modest arts and crafts house. The
Yeah.
fact is they're in an extended family now. My
Mm.
sister, who is retired, picks up those kids from school. They have a
Yeah.
relationship, very close relationship with their grandparents.
Yeah.
It's made a difference
Yeah.
in those kids don't have the anxiety I see with a lot of kids who
Right.
were during COVID and lockdown. They're
Right.
outgoing. They have a lot of friends. They're
Yeah.
not afraid to, they're not anxious. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if it isn't that kind of, you know, all
Yeah.
ages type thing that is, I mean, it wasn't for me. I couldn't wait to escape and just leave the enclave where I came up in, where you were expected to, not go to college, marry some guy from the neighborhood and
Sure.
start having kids right away. I was
Yeah.
really not into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now that the years have gone by, though, my niece is able to go to, she's got her master's. She's a teacher. She's a
Yeah.
special ed teacher. So there's a little bit of both, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
available
Absolutely.
now. It's
Well,
not exactly the same that made me want to just run away,
well, I'm kind of like you in that as somebody who grew up severely dyslexic and was finally dumped in British boarding schools where counterintuitively you'd say, oh, that must have been horrible. No, that was wonderful. It was my release. It was me running
Yes,
away at age 10. And
yes,
very fortunately, the first one I was dumped in was run by these remarkable people who had never heard the word dyslexic, but they were kind.
nice. That's all that counts.
And it
That's
made a huge thing. Anyway, the
total.
second one I ran away from when I was 15, and that was the end of it. So basically, I fall into the cohort that you described saying, well, you weren't expected to go to college, you just got married and had babies. That's me, but it all worked out.
Right,
Uh, Only because the person I married, Regina Ann Walsh, was a remarkable woman, and I could have wound up with anybody,
right.
but I wound up with her, and it was just, this wonderful, luck of the draw and blessing in life. That's a different story. But the thing I want to get to with you is that if it wasn't for spell check, And it wasn't for the fact that my computer savvy son, who graduated from Georgetown, came and taught me to type because Jeannie was typing up everything of mine because I couldn't type. And I said, well, I can never learn to use a computer because I've never learned anything, the sort of
Right.
dyslexic excuse.
Right.
But I was rescued by technology and by a very tech savvy physics teacher who's my son. So I'm like you, but
Yeah.
I kind of think there's another dynamic at work too, and that is that a lot of our culture when it comes to family dynamics has been deconstructed.
Yes. Yes.
When, it's not a question of individual experiences, but history is made up of tipping points,
Right.
and usually when they're happening, you don't see it.
It's, it's
Um,
true.
but we've arrived at a series of tipping points that I think exacerbate the technology. In other words, if most people were growing up in stable family relationships, then the phones wouldn't have such a big effect. If most people were growing up and there hadn't been so many changes,
Right.
then
That's
maybe the
right.
phone is just a thing we can handle better. But the thing
That's
is,
right.
when you put it all together, the entertainment values of the culture, as opposed to getting down to, this sort of entertain yourself to death syndrome, millions of choices, and then you add the phones into that. Plus, you're coming from a home that is dysfunctional and or
Right.
broken up and or bitter. Somehow, I can't point to it, but when you put that all together, some lonely guy sitting on a bench staring at a phone, I get it. And what he's
Yeah.
owed by me is not necessarily another government program, but an apology
Right. Right.
because they have been had, they haven't been. So, at least you had a stability in your background, even including the nuns. You're writing a book at
It's true.
making humor at their expense, but
It's true.
they were better than nothing.
Yes. Yes.
You know what I'm
Well,
saying? Put it this way, I'll ask you a question. You think they were better than nothing?
Well, the good part was I mean, the best parts that I can figure out is that it did spur me on to read other things
Yeah.
because I realized how restricted the reading was. And my editors loved me because I'm really good at grammar because they were all
Yes.
grammar Nazis.
Yeah. Yeah.
But other than that, if I hadn't been a reader, I think I would have come out of there really not equipped to do
Yeah.
anything other than what they had prepared. We didn't even have home ec in at Our Lady Help
No,
of
I
Christians
understand.
where I went. It
Yeah.
was more like it was just like become a trad wife, and um,
Yeah.
it wasn't going to. I knew it wasn't going to happen, and it was
Yeah.
even more. Um, Once I started getting into civil rights and all of the other, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. I mean, and there was no kind of civil discourse happening. I remember a kid coming up to me at I think I went to a Stephen King reading and he was someone I knew from high school and he said,
Yeah.
"I remember when you wore a black armband to school when those civil
Hmm.
rights workers got killed." I was like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, but I was the only one in the school who did that, you
Yeah.
know? There
Yeah.
was no movement for
Wasn't happening.
yeah."
Let me fast forward to something because I just want you to read one other thing here. Unfortunately, I like your book too much. So as far as I'm concerned, you should just start at the beginning and keep going. I want you to read something else that I put here. If you want to grab your book and
Yeah.
go to, what page is that? If you want to go to page 137,
137.
Quando Mai,
Oh, quando mai. Yeah.
and I want you to just read a bit of this until you get sick of reading a few pages, whatever, because
Okay.
this is an incredible part of the book. And I want you to read a bit of this. But first of all, set it up because we're
Okay.
jumping way ahead with people. I don't want to
Well, the
confuse
members
them.
of Christina's class have been sent ahead to find a saint to write about that is their name saint.
Right.
And they have to write, you know, uh, a piece that is just going to be just fawning and all of that. And
Yeah.
so Christina's in the library with her friends, and she's furious that she has to do this. So she's just categorizing instead of writing her thing, she's categorizing all the nuns that she's had and what they've done to her. So this is what this is what she writes
Yeah.
for her paper. Sister
Yeah.
Juventinus, the first grade nun who passed back corrected papers marked with either a star for getting it right or a baby for getting it wrong, and who
Mhm.
never told Christina why making all her twos backwards was incorrect, who stamped a chubby, curled up baby on her paper, which made Christina forever after associate babies with shame. Pray for us. Sister Aloysius, the second grade nun, who rationed bathroom breaks so severely that the
Mm,
aisles between the desks ran daily with rivulets of pee that no one
mm,
acknowledged were there. Pray for us. Sister Frederica, the third grade nun, who was an impish hair puller, an ear twister, and whose cheery, pointed features had the power to make the muscles in Christina's face jump from a distance, even when Christina was home and supposedly safe.
mm,
Pray for us. Sister Isaac Jogues, the fourth grade nun who had a martyr fetish and penchant for hanging signs on kids and parading them through other classes for humiliation and finger pointing and derisive laughter that would echo forever down the corridors of their lives. Pray for us.
mm,
Sister Boniface, the fifth grade nun who declaimed over and over every day the phrase, "Woe betide you," in the thunderous voice of an Old Testament doomsayer, and then delivered the woe with the stoic formal sorrow of a masked
mm.
executioner. Pray for us. Sister Liberata, the sixth grade nun who told the boys they were the spawn of the devil and loved the girls, except for the ones with vowels at the end of their names, who were the spawn of Mary Magdalene, junior whores, whose breasts came in too early to be decent, except for Christina, freakish member of her own tribe who didn't even have the whispered
Mm,
promise
mm,
of
mm.
tits. Pray for us. Should I stop there?
Well, people get the flavor, but I don't know why I love that section so much. I mean, it's all in italics too. I just want to show everybody. It sort of jumps out at you. And there's another passage a little later that jumps out where you've couched it as a letter,
Oh, yeah.
a
Yes.
confessional letter, and I'm desperately looking through where I marked the page. Um, Here's a line, but it isn't that. All the drippy girls in Cecilia's clique sing along with her obedient drone swarming the queen bee. I love that.
Yes.
I've marked too many passages in this book, but where's the letter? The letter of
Oh, I know.
confession.
The letter's later. It's way later.
No
It's
daughter of mine leaves this house unless it's with her
right.
husband, decrees with the force of Zeus hurling a thunderbolt. It's not there. It's
It's
later. It's
after
later.
swing time.
Yeah.
Okay, you got bereavement. Uh,
Breaking the seal? No, that's not the letter. Oh
yes,
yeah,
breaking the seal. Yes,
that's what it's about. It's page
yes,
242.
yes, yes.
Okay, so explain why I had a question just as one writer to another. I love it, by the way,
Yeah.
but it was very clever. But what gave you the idea and why did you make this a letter?
You know what? I originally read this to a crowd of people with a bunch
Yeah,
of other women, and I was solicited to be a part of this thing that when I don't know what it's called. It's when women write letters to they're assigned.
yeah,
Um,
sure.
and this was a letter to my secret, and
Yeah,
so I wrote this as a letter to my secret
yeah,
first, and then
yeah.
I adapted it for this novel.
Okay, so I
So
want you to explain where it comes in the book and who it's to and who it's from so people locate it again. But again, it's the opening, the bit you read just now, and then this. I just found very unusual portions of your book. They were very
yes.
different ways of setting things up.
This is when she's moved on.
Yeah,
She,
no,
you
and I
know,
love that. And I
yeah.
want to get that feeling. So go there. Let's read that
Okay.
letter.
Dear Father, this chapter is called Breaking the Seal.
Yeah.
Dear Father, generic Irish name. I can't remember your name or face, just your collar and ankle length man
Mm,
dress. I'm not good at keeping secrets, Father. Right now, as a side note, I want to assure any friends that somehow happen to read this, for other people's secrets, I have extreme Sicilian level omerta.
mm,
But for my own, not so much. I'm a blabbermouth by nature and an actress by trade, so I don't have many good secrets left at this point because they've all been blabbed. But I feel like it's time to break the seal of the confessional. When they told us at the retreat that due to the new rules of the church, confession is now going to be a face-to-face deal,
mm,
I'll admit it threw me, the face-to-face thing. I was 17 years old and about to graduate from the parochial school I had gone to since kindergarten. All the girls in my class had spent a weekend at the Holy Family Retreat House, where we were supposed to be praying and getting ready for our roles as Catholic wives and mothers in the outside world after high school. It was the late 60s. There were no other options at the time except nurse or teacher or secretary. The night before the face-to-face, you and some of the other priests had, inexplicably and creepily, screened Fellini's La Strada for
mm,
us, a film with Giulietta Messina and Anthony Quinn. Anthony Quinn is a strong man in a circus who buys Giulietta Messina from her impoverished mother.
mm,
He is brutal to Giulietta Messina, and he abandons her in the end, but this drives him crazy. Nobody got why we were seeing this film, but I got that I wanted to do what Julieta Messina was doing, shine like I was lit from within and make people laugh and cry.
Mm,
I was lit from within. I made her my patron saint of acting. So thank
mm,
you for that. Now I know what I wanted to do after high school. The face-to-face confession was supposed to be the last holy ritual we did before we were able to go home. It was a required thing, like when you go before a parole board.
mm,
At the time, I finally had a boyfriend who wasn't monosyllabic and who read books and could quote Oscar Wilde and Edward Gorey at will, which made me love him. We were romantically dry humping in rooms heaped with coats at teenage parties, and I was writing profane poetry for him about chalices of flesh, inspired by Rimbaud and Baudelaire and
mm,
Sylvia Plath. For this required confession, I'd kind of been counting on the usual setup that even non-Catholics have seen in films or read about: the little booth, the blackout curtain, the darkness, and the further anonymity of the face-level grate that
mm,
distorts your features so that you're unrecognizable afterwards in a crowd of other girls. Instead, you opened the door to a prissy living room with two pale satin upholstered chairs facing each other.
mm,
I was awkward and confused, and the lace mantilla I was wearing got caught in my mouth and made me choke. You looked eager and smiley. Was I supposed to kneel before you while you sat? No, you informed me I could sit in my chair facing you while I said the ritual words, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned."
mm,
I realized that when I told you about the boy touching me, it was partly because of my impulse control issue and partly due to my being an incorrigible show off. I kind of wanted to brag about my new boyfriend who wasn't even Catholic and had a grandfather who was Chinese and wore his glossy black hair long and had an upper lip that mesmerized me because it curved into a natural sneer.
mm,
You weren't impressed, as I recall. You got right down to business and asked if I let the boy touch me, and I said I did. I was absurdly proud of this. Most boys just told me you're weird and walked away at Catholic
mm,
Youth Organization dances. You got very serious and killjoy and told me that you couldn't grant me absolution unless I promised to never do it again. And the way you said that you, as the agent and direct representative and mouthpiece of God, would deny me forgiveness, and the idea that I would remain forever tainted by sin, unforgiven, with a compromised, blackened soul, that terrified me for about a minute.
mm,
And then, for the first time in a long time, I listened to my mother, even though my mother and I were mortal enemies at the time. Do you know what a mangiapreti is, Father? The literal translation is priest eater in Italian. It
mm,
also means anti-cleric. My mother was from Italy, and she was a mangiapreti, even though she sent me to Catholic school. She thought it had to be better because you paid for it. It wasn't. It really wasn't. I remembered when I was a little kid and cried because she never went to confession, and I was afraid she would burn in hell and
mm,
not go to heaven where I planned to reside for all eternity. She was rolling out the Sunday macaroni at the time, and she cut off two strands and twisted them together. She showed them to me and said they were called strozzapreti, priest stranglers, because when she was in Italy and they didn't have much to eat, the priest would invite himself over for dinner and he would eat a big plate of strozzapreti that was supposed to be for the whole family, and they would end up going hungry, and he should choke on it. And that's why they're called priest stranglers.
mm,
I told her that you were the human representative of God on earth, and strangling a priest was murder. But then she said that the priest was making them morta di fame, dying of hunger.
mm,
And that was also murder, just slower. She said to be careful around priests and never let them touch me. I thought she was crazy and prayed for her and hoped her craziness would prevent her from the eternal fire.
mm,
Turns out she's smart, my mother. So you may be wondering why I talked about breaking the seal of the confessional at the beginning of this letter when you're the one bound to secrecy. Well, Father, I want to thank you. That confession was the beginning of a transfer of power. I took the power from you to stand in for God as her representative, and that's why it's me breaking the bonds of the confessional and not you. So no worries on your part. On that day, I told you that I would never do it again. Only I didn't specify that I would never let the boy touch me again.
mm, mm,
I just agreed that I would never do it again.
mm,
And I didn't even really know at the time that when I said I would never do it again, that it would mean that I would never again, in the dark or face to face in full daylight, confess my sins to a
Mm,
man who claimed to be standing in for God.
mm,
Sincerely, Christina the Astonishing
mm.
Falcone.
Yeah, and I love it so much that I got teared up when you're reading it because it's such a fantastic piece of writing, but also so true. And I just want to say, the reason I chose to sort of, we're not quite wrapped up yet, but the reason I chose to wrap up close to that reading is because, of course, this book is breaking the seal. The whole book
Right,
is.
right.
And so essentially you have dared to write a book about your family, even though big chunks are made up because it's a novel, in a way that breaks trust. But on the other hand, since I love your family, obviously you have served them well. And I don't know, what they would feel about it, but you've certainly given their memory wings, and your mom, your dad, and so forth. They had a good girl. You've taken care of them on the way through, which is very moving to me. So I want to ask you something about this breaking of the seal, and then kind of wrap it up there. And by the way, when I sign off here in a moment, having thanked you for being here, please stick around one more second because we're going to make this a book club offering
Okay,
in
great.
February, and I want you to talk to my producer Ernie to make sure we line up all our ducks in a row, and also suggest to him any other guests we should be talking to,
Okay.
because some of our best leads come from people we
Yes,
have
yes,
on
I'm
who say, by
sure.
the way, if you like my book, you'd love fill in the
Yes,
blank. It
yes.
doesn't have to be writers, it can be
Right, right,
anybody. They don't have to be famous.
right.
But where I want to wrap this up a little bit is just on a kind of a writerly question, and that is the same one Andre asked me when he was writing Townie. And he said, you've written this memoir, Crazy for God, and what's the feedback you get from your family, and how do I kind of draw a balance? And the thing I told him that I tell anybody who asks me this question, and I want to get your reflection on it, is I say, look, books have various drafts. And in the early drafts, don't write thinking, what will anyone think? Much less, how will my mom like this? How will this go with my sister? Because I have a sister that's sort of like her in the book, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. I said that the only time you ask yourselves those questions is when all the passion for the project is over and it's just work and you're in the 10th draft and you're editing. Then, in that moment, when inspiration won't come anymore because that's all done, and you're not going to fuck your book up by asking yourself psychological questions or family questions or how will my uncle like this, or worst of all, is this fair?
Yeah,
Because the only question you ask when you're writing is, is this work? Is this flowing out well?
right.
Um, would you give the same advice to someone who's watching this, who's a writer and wants to write a memoir type fiction or a memoir type book, or would you add anything to that?
Well, all I want to add to that is the dedication that I wrote for my second memoir, which was about my mother, called
Yeah,
Ma Speaks Up. I
yeah,
dedicated it to my brother and sister, and
yeah,
I said to them, and I said, all of us from the same source, but each with a different story to tell.
yeah, yeah.
Because we
Wonderful.
each experienced our mother differently. I
Yeah,
mean,
of
if you're from a family, you experience it differently. My brother, the
course.
Principe, he experienced it very differently
Yeah.
from, you know, the girls. And so, yeah, I agree with you totally about that.
Yeah, and of course, it's like when people talk about their parents, different siblings have different parents because you
That's
come
right.
at a different stage of their life. They were getting
That's right.
on when you were little, now they're divorced or
Yes.
whatever. It's all different.
Yes. Yes. So, I mean, my sister was only 7 when my father died,
Yeah,
so
it's
she
a whole
didn't
different
really,
deal.
yeah. So, I mean, it's very much like that. And I didn't feel any kind of fear about this,
Yeah,
putting it out there. I mean, all my old people are dead, sadly,
yeah,
but I actually think my mother would have liked the book I wrote about her.
yeah.
And I think she would have liked this too. I mean, I mean, the only character I didn't really mess with in this was the mother because my mother was such a colorful person that I
Absolutely.
decided to just adapt her totally to this book because I mean, my friends still quote her. So, you know, well, you
Yeah,
remember Fonny's mother. I mean, there are these personalities of these women
absolutely.
that just, my mother was had a very strong personality and,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
even
in
though
my
we,
life, I sort of had different experiences. When Portofino came out, I had a sister who didn't speak to me for 7 years
oh my
and
God.
said that I told, tales out of school. Here,
Oh.
but you'll like this part. but my mother bought 17 copies of the hardback and sent them to her best friend signed. And obviously, she hadn't been as insulted as my sister said she had, because
Right.
my sister was, by the way, this particular sister still is that super pietistic.
Uh,
She's more religious than my parents ever were. Everything is the Lord telling her this or whatever. So what was interesting is she was defending my mother, who liked the book and wasn't insulted, but my sister wouldn't talk to me. Now we repaired that and it's all fine. And now we're old people, getting into that time of age where you have
yeah.
to be a total idiot to carry all that baggage in,
Yeah.
because we all
Yeah.
know our days are numbered now. At least I do.
Yes. Yes.
And my wife had a heart attack 5 years ago, and I've changed our diet and I do all the cooking, and it's a whole different world. So if you can bear a grudge now, you're a real idiot,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because your days are numbered, and we
Yeah.
all know that. But back
However,
in the day,
I do agree that you should remove toxic people from your life. I
yeah,
mean, I think
well,
that
she removed herself,
mm, mm.
and we don't
I mean,
talk
this has
much since.
happened in my family. In the Trump era, it's endemic.
It's horrible.
It's endemic. Everybody has
Things are
experienced
going
that.
on, and of course, we didn't go there because I don't know how your blood pressure is, and I don't want to kill you.
I gotta say, there are people I haven't spoken to, including, my neighbor across the street put up a sign, "The best is yet to come." Not the
Yeah,
first time, the second time. And
yeah,
I thought, you watch me walk my son by in a wheelchair every day, and now you're telling me you're cool with the guy who mocked the way he held his hands. So this is what he gets every time I see him,
absolutely. Yeah,
and I
yeah,
dare him to come and speak to me. He
yeah.
hasn't dared to yet.
Well, and
So,
of course, as we speak right now, the food stamps for all the people walking their
oh,
sons in wheelchairs past their home, your son's shadow somewhere will now go hungry in addition to everything
that's
else.
right. That's right. And I can't stop thinking of that. So,
Yeah, we live in fraught times, but, and this is not a stretch, all the more reason to read a book like this that has a deep soul to it and laugh while you're reading it, because guess what? Being a human doesn't stop, which is what I
that's
always tell
right.
young people, saying, well, the world, blah, 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 blah.
We
So,
need laughter and we need to fight back against bullies. This tells you
we
to do
do. And
both.
we also need love. And I don't mean that in a wishy-washy way,
Yeah.
but I had a godson a while back ago who was telling me this big rigmarole, how he's been with this girl for 7 years and they love each other, but she's got a new job opportunity in LA, but he's staying here because that's where, and I'm saying, from my stage of life, I don't look at anything I've ever done career-wise, the failures or the successes, they don't outweigh the time I have with Jeannie.
Yes.
Walking next to her as she was on a gurney after a heart attack, I wasn't sitting there thinking about why wasn't saving grandma as
Yeah.
selling as well as
Good care.
Portofino.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, you don't get life if you think you have another bite at this. Do you love her?
Yeah.
Then move to LA or have
Yeah.
her give up the job. But for goodness
Absolutely.
sake, are you
Absolutely.
crazy?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Chris and I, when we had Jesse and had
Yeah,
to move, and I proposed, I was like, the New York schools have 7% inclusion.
yeah,
I mean, and it was pre-internet. And
yeah,
what I learned was that we were above the federal average here in
yeah,
Massachusetts.
yeah.
Sadly, we moved to the one town that did not have someone who honored that.
Just explain about Jesse 1 second so people
Our
can
son
relate.
was born 10 weeks early,
Yeah,
and through a really strange occurrence that set it off was me walking to MGM. I was a reader for MGM.
yeah,
This is how I learned to write screenplay. I'm
yeah,
returning my work, and some guy commits suicide by jumping off the Hotel Warwick.
yeah,
And if I'd been 5 minutes earlier, he would have landed on me. So I go
yeah.
into labor later that night.
Sure.
And I have Jesse 10 weeks early. And as a result of his third day of his life, he develops a grade 4 cerebral hemorrhage. He is cognitively not affected, but it's really hard to tell people that when you have a kid who is nonverbal and in a wheelchair.
Yeah,
Um, but the fact is that Jesse was in the 99th percentile
yeah,
for
yeah,
intelligence. So it made us fight even harder to get him. We realized that he needed to be in school.
yeah,
So we did move to this town where the special ed director was quoted as saying, "Why should we spend money on these kids? They don't give anything back to society."
yeah.
So don't say that to an Italian mother because I'll kill you.
Right.
And
I hear
so
that.
I said to my husband, he's going to school. That guy's getting a dead horse's head in his bed, and he's not going
Yeah,
to have a job when I'm through
yeah,
with him. And that happened. There were 6 lawsuits. Jesse went to school.
yeah,
Um, and Yeah, he lost his job. So,
Yeah.
but it was a real battle and it was really hard and it took 2 years and we were losing weight and I bought a punching bag so I could
Yeah.
get through it.
Yeah.
So it was a difficult. That was the biggest fight of my, I mean, I guess all the activism in college prepared me for this, right?
Sure.
To
But this
become
time, to be a very Italian about it, this time it was personal.
absolutely,
La
absolutely. Yeah.
famiglia, you know?
La familia, absolutely. And that's how I feel about it when I see, when I see people who tell me proudly that they're supporting, Mango Mussolini, I'm not
Yeah.
all in. It's
Well,
like,
I feel the same way about some of our dear brothers selling us the algorithms that put us all in rabbit holes where we hate each other,
yes, it's
making
awful.
billions out of it, and at the same time joining groups on the West Coast that tend to look for other members of the elite with which to have perfect genetically tested babies,
Ugh, yeah,
because
yeah,
God forbid we have anybody imperfect.
yeah, yeah. Oh
There,
God, they have a
to
lot
put
to
it really
learn.
mildly, I am not charmed.
Yeah, they have a lot to learn, those people. They don't
Yeah, they
understand.
do, and like I said at the beginning, and in no way, trying to cater to doing a nice interview with you, but from my heart, growing up in this weird religious cult, the friends I had to play with who weren't members of the cult
Yeah,
were in wheelchairs next door of all ages. They took them from age 3 up to about 25. It was supposed to be up to 18, but there was nowhere to some people to go.
that taught you compassion at an early age. It
It
taught
really
you
did.
empathy. It taught
Yeah.
empathy is the basis of
Yeah.
art. It's the
Yeah.
basis of art. That's why during fascist eras, you don't
Yeah.
have good art. You have shit
Exactly.
art
Shit
at
art.
that
It's all
time.
propaganda and shit
It's
art.
total. And
Yeah.
afterwards is the release. That's when in
Yeah.
Italy, Neorealismo, Fellini,
Sure.
all those guys, they just prospered then. And
Yeah.
that's what I think I look to happening here, please.
Yeah.
For there to be
Absolutely
a,
right.
yeah, for
Well,
there to be
hey,
a
you're
reawakening of
you're part of the
empathy.
solution here in the midst of this dark time, writing a good book, and here it is. And we've been talking about Christina the Astonishing. It's our book club offering. It has to be read, and you have been talking with me, Frank Schaeffer, whatever podcast, and Marianne Leone, and any other little boilerplate here. And my new project is The Gospel of Zip, and it goes live on November 1,
Cool.
both on YouTube, where I read the whole thing out loud for free, and I'm giving it away because I want people who don't read to read it. And my agent has literally, you'll get this, not pleased with me, nor are the two publishers that made offers. But I decided to just, I don't have anything to prove. I've written some books that have sold well, and I'm giving this one away. No strings attached. There's no
I
hook here.
love you, Frank. I think that's
There's no
fabulous.
800 number to go to. And by the way, I've written it in sections that are text length
Beautiful. You're
because it's
smart.
like, 347 quote chapters of a book that's only 200 and some pages long, but
Right.
whatever. But
You're very smart.
that's my Trump moment. I did my works of humor, Portofino,
Yes.
Saving Grandma, blah, blah. You're doing yours. You wrote your serious books first.
Yes.
I mean, in a weird way, right? And I wrote
Yes.
my works of humor first. Then I wrote some serious books. And now I've written another book, The Gospel of Zip, about my dog Zip.
Ah.
But it has a lot of life lessons about relationships and marriage and getting on with people and what I call the survival of the friendliest, not the survival of the fittest, God damn it.
Dogs can teach you a lot, man. I mean, you gotta
Absolutely.
read Five Dog Epiphany because what that's about is grief, rescue dogs, and
Yeah.
mutual healing. And I wrote in that, for example, Titi, who was kept in a cage and
Yeah.
gave up litter after litter and so neglected that the guy let the harness grow into her flesh, so she was a fear biter and
Yeah.
nobody was adopting her. But we look at each other and we're just PTSD mirrors of each other. I've
Yeah.
had a great loss. She's had lost litter after litter and also, you
Yeah.
know, and just to watch her even now and see her boldness that she has come into from
Yeah.
a terrified, quivering little girl who, like, the first day drew blood from my husband,
Yeah.
who now, if he even looks at her, is she's Marilyn Monroe and Some Like It
Yeah. It's
Hot,
so sweet.
shimmying all over. But she now has her perch at the top of the sofa
Yeah.
where she can watch everything and rule. And I
Yeah.
love it. I
Well,
just love it.
yesterday or the day before, I interviewed another author who's written a book called Lab Dog about a dog she rescued. She writes for the Washington Post, New York Times, all this stuff. But she was traveling with him in an Airstream trailer, and this was a dog who had been put in a cage, and you'll get this, couldn't even walk because it had no muscles, just sat there. And the dogs in the other cages next to it, they'd cut their vocal cords so they didn't have to listen to them.
No.
And this was in a major university that she rescued
Oh,
from.
that's disgusting.
And you and I feel the same way about it. But the thing is, I have several recurring themes on this podcast, in case you're wondering. I interview a lot of women, about 80%. I interview a lot of people who have animals and love them. And I interview people who have had journeys like mine from whatever background,
Yes.
and come to another place. And this book fits all of it
Oh,
because
I'm
you've
so
written a book
happy
about
about that.
dogs and journeys. So um, we are on the same page, Marianne, and I just want to thank you. And thank you for your generosity in reading so much out loud. But
Oh, I loved
I
it.
wanted
Yeah.
people to get the flavor of the book in your voice.
Well, being an actor, it really helps and it makes it fun for me. So
Yeah.
thank you.
So stick around, talk to Ernie for a minute.
Sure.
And I love you very much. And I
Love
love
you,
your
Donald.
work. And
Thank
I
you.
love this book.
Yay.
And I
I'm so
laughed, I
pleased.
smiled, I wept. And I'm sorry we couldn't just listen to the whole thing and that I had to do some talking because my name's on this stupid
I'm
podcast.
very
Thank you.
happy that you did, Frank. You asked great questions.
Okay,
Thank
thanks a
you.
lot.